So we're going to do our, Kathy's going to come up. Kathy usually, she speaks once in a while. She's not like me. She doesn't just talk to talk. So she's going to come up and talk to Jen, who is our mission moment this year.
Good evening, ladies, and thank you again for coming. I would like to introduce you to Jen Sensnig. She is the executive director for our mission this time at Sisters in Christ called North Star Initiative. So we're going to fill you in a little bit about what North Star is all about. So, I don't know if many of you have ever heard of North Star before. Jen does have a table set up in the back of the lobby area, and you can check those things out at the end of the evening. But Jen's here to explain to us what human trafficking is. So could you tell us a little bit more about that, Miss Jen?
I can. And, you know, after some of these ladies, I feel like my topic is the downer of the night at times when we come. But unfortunately, it's alive and well. And human trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery in which people profit from the control and exploitation of others.
So North Star then is specifically focused on helping individuals who've been victims of sex trafficking. And is this happening in Pennsylvania? And if so, like, where is it and why is it?
Yeah, I think it's hard for us to imagine that it's here in Pennsylvania and here specifically in Lancaster County. I know I had a hard time wrapping my head around that. But unfortunately, it's thriving in Pennsylvania. You see, Pennsylvania used to be a through state for this issue, specifically Route 30, the interstate highways, and I-95 were convenient and have been utilized by traffickers to transport these victims all over the place through Pennsylvania to the surrounding metropolitan areas to be used. However, in the past couple of years, it's changed where Pennsylvania has now become the destination state. And so you can travel around on these highways and you can stop in at the truck stops and find these victims being utilized there at any given night, any time of night. But it's not just there. You know, one of my first exposures to this was out on Route 30 across from Target. And so the Route 30 Target area actually is a hot spot for this issue. And the girls are being trafficked in from other states. And the operations there are actually utilizing them and cooperating with bringing these girls in. And the massage spas, the hotels, gangs, ethnic brothels are where you're going to find them. Unfortunately, as sad as it is, family systems are trafficking their children as well. And Craigslist, Backpage, and much to my horror as a mom, Facebook is another place that these girls and these kids are being used. You know, the sad, awful fact is that the demand for sex is everywhere. And as long as there's demand, you're going to find victims of trafficking and exploitation.
Well, how many trafficking victims are there in the United States? Like, are there places where the victims can go?
Yeah. You know, they estimate, and I'm not sure how they come up with all these great numbers, but they estimate that around 51,000 to 60,500 are brought in to the United States from other countries, trafficked in. And so you add that to around, they say the conservative number of our own children is 100,000 of our own U.S. kids and women and children that are being, and boys are in this, that are being used and trafficked. But they estimate that really that number could be upwards to 300,000 of our own domestic kids. And so as far as resources and people reaching out, you know, what's being provided as far as shelter and restorative care for this population, an anti-trafficking organization released a shelter report at the end of the year last year. And, you know, the encouraging thing is that there is huge response happening to this issue. And so the beds and the number of care has grown. And so it's a little over 2,000. It's about 2,173 beds that are available now that have specialized care for these victims. And yet, while that sounds wonderful and good, you compare that to the statistics I gave you right at the beginning, it doesn't even really begin to address the great, great need for shelter and restorative care for this population.
That sounds like just like a drop in the bucket, for these children. Well, what is North Star doing to help the problem with this lack of resources for victims?
Yeah, this is kind of our niche and where God has called us to fill in the gap here. Our mission is restoring women from trafficking for freedom, for life, forever. And so we are devoted to providing support to victims of sex trafficking and sexual exploitation by addressing their physical, psychological, spiritual, and emotional needs through a Christ-centered focus. And how we're planning to do this is we're opening Lancaster County's first restoration home called the Harbor. And our heart is that when this is established and up and running, we're going to be able to house anywhere from 7 to 10 women, ages 18 and above, and bring wraparound care through the cross of Jesus Christ. So we're estimating right now our current need is around $300,000 to $350,000 to build the home. We have the property, and we are working on raising the funding for the home, and we're around $150,000, a little over that, and more than halfway there to meeting our need. And we have just been really encouraged and excited to see how God has been moving around Lancaster County, around Pennsylvania, and even the nation, just for people to respond and give to the harbor.
Yeah, I was looking at your layout for the home plans, and I just thought that looks like a wonderful place that these girls will be able to go and find healing. That's just awesome. So how can someone get involved with North Star? Like, what can we do to help?
Yeah, well, to me, this is the best part of the interview because it no longer becomes about me and North Star, but it becomes about every single one of you out there today. And, as I get ready to talk about how you can engage, I feel like we need to share a story just to kind of bring it all home. We hear these statistics and they become mind-numbing, paralyzing to the point where we just think we can't possibly make a difference with this issue. And so I want to share a story with you that kind of takes it from the statistic to the story of someone with a real face, a real name, and a heart that's in need of restoring. I get to the point with this issue that I think I've heard it all. I've hit my saturation point, and I can't possibly be broken over this again. And yet God brings something else across my path. And recently, I've had a chance to come across one of our neighbor girls who grew up with my daughter and would come to our house to play. And as I kind of entered into her situation again, God used it to re-break my heart with her story because she is the girl who is at risk. Her story is the one who, as I heard it, I realized she is the one who is at risk of becoming the statistic for what we do. Her story is the story that these pimps and traffickers look for to exploit and use for sex trafficking and human trafficking. And I just want to share a little bit about her. There it was again, a faint, timid knocking. Sounding off my impatient huff, I got up to answer, knowing that whoever it was ran interference to the nightly routine of getting my daughter in bed. Peering out into the dark, I had to strain to see her. Deep, rich, chocolate brown eyes glistened in the black night. The fact that she didn't have on a jacket in the brisk fall air served in helping me locate her thin, white, milky arms that reflected in the outdoor light. "Miss Jen," she smiled. I asked her in, and I looked behind her to see who brought her to my door at this time of night. Glancing around, it was apparent. No one. Bringing her in, I was completely amazed that this little 6-year-old had made her way in the dark to my home completely unattended from another street in my neighborhood. It wasn't the first time. She showed up often at our doorstep or in my backyard alone. She'd come and stay for minutes, but usually she came for hours. Finding her way around our house, she would play with my daughter, but usually she'd shadow me wherever I went, asking nonstop questions or wanting to help. Occasionally, she'd settle in to snuggle as we read a book or watched a silly TV show. Hours later, time to go home was announced by Grandma showing up, cursing and yelling at her that she had wandered off by herself and that she was going to get a beating when she got home. This particular evening, I got my daughter safely tucked into the warmth of her bed, and fast on my heels as I headed back to the living room was the neighborhood girl. As I headed back, I got a glimpse again of her dirt-tinged face and her matted, uncombed hair, and the thought completely stopped me as it slammed my heart. No one is looking for her. Does anyone even know she's missing? Well, I knew that she came to our home for fun and play, for attention and love, to be cared for, and for shelter. Shelter from what? I could only wonder. Was it because she was overlooked and no one noticed or cared for her? Was it that creepy grandfather that sat in his corner chair when you entered the room and made sexual innuendos? But maybe it was her mom who was pregnant again with her second sister and another boyfriend that came to live in the house. Or the uncle addicted to drugs and who was headed off to jail again. You know, I could only imagine what she needed shelter from. Blink, and 9 years later, removed by time, distance, and the excuse of busyness, I found myself looking into chocolate brown eyes. But she didn't smile this time, displaying that life had already happened to this little neighbor girl turned young woman. Reflecting on the story I was told by a local friend and the grandma, I wondered what happened in her life since mine last touched hers. Oh, she's in trouble. She sneaks out all night these days. She sleeps around, and a whole bunch of the guys talk about how they've slept with her. Looking at her in her tight, skinny blue jeans, her vulnerable, dark-lined, heavily mascaraed eyes, I wondered again, what did this girl experience in her short 15 years, and what did she need shelter from, if only from herself? Once again, the thought invaded me, is anyone looking for her? Does anyone realize that she's gone missing? More disturbing thoughts came on the heels of these, ones that I wanted to rebel against and shove away. What about me? Do I see her? Am I looking for her? And ladies, that is the point of why I'm here tonight, to ask every one of you, are we looking, are we searching for those who need you so desperately, to reach out to them? And if we look and see, are we willing to engage in the messy, dirty, broken lives that by all accounts our society has declared unworthy and disposable? You know, the point of why I'm here is every single one of you tonight. And now you know. You can't leave here tonight saying you're ignorant about this population or this issue anymore. And you all have a choice to make this evening what you're going to do with it. If God is calling you, and if God is calling you specifically to engage, we have a place for you in North Star. If you're called, first of all, we want to invite you to become an advocate, to be a voice for these women and these children who have virtually lost their own. And so you can join us at our next training. Take our volunteer sheet from the back table and sign up. It's coming up in April. You can also pray and intercede. I can't tell you just sometimes the spiritual darkness that we face and the strongholds as we come up against different stories and different local women who have been trafficked. And so we need you to intercede for the mission of North Star and for the harbor as we get this home open. The next intercession night is coming up in March. You can sign up on the contact sheet, take our prayer card, take our prayer candle, but we need you to intercede and pray. And lastly, Again, we need monthly donors. We have to get this home open for these girls, and so you can take part in that tonight by, you're going to have an opportunity in a minute with the offering. Take our donation cards from the back, go to our PayPal account on the website and give there, but we need every single one of you to help us open the harbor and make it a home for these women. However God's inviting you to engage, we just want to invite you to partner in with restoring women from trafficking for freedom, for life, forever.
Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate that you shared your story with your little girl from the neighborhood and how we can affect somebody else's life in that way. Thank you so much.
You were reaching through the storm, walking on the water, even when I could not see. In the middle of it all, when I thought you were 1,000 miles away, not for a moment did you forsake me, not for a moment did you forsake me. After all, you are constant. After all, you are only good. After all, you are sovereign. Not for a moment will you forsake me. Not for a moment will you forsake me. You were singing in the dark, whispering your promise, even when I could not hear. I was held in your arms, carried for 1,000 miles, show not for a moment did you forsake me, not for a moment did you forsake me. After all, you are constant. After all, you are only good. After all, you are sovereign. Not for a moment will you forsake me. Not for a moment did you forsake me. Every step, every breath, you are there. Every tear, every cry, every prayer. In my hurt, at my worst, when my world falls down, not for a moment will you forsake me. Not for a moment will you forsake me. After all, you are constant. After all, you are only good. After all, you are sovereign. Not for a moment will you forsake me. Not for a moment will you forsake me. After all, you are constant. After all, you are only good. After all, you are sovereign. Not for a moment will you forsake me. Not for a moment will you forsake